Hi everyone, welcome back to today's video. Today I am doing my October wrap up and I wanted to share, I believe there's 5 books that I got to in November, and I want to share my feedback and what I thought about them. So if you are new here, thank you for stopping by. My name is Tanya and I like making videos about simple frugal living as well as a lot of bookish content as well. I am a mom, a teacher, and a librarian, so I love all things book, related. They're a big part of my life, so I love sharing about them here on my channel. And let's get into today's video, and I hope that if you enjoy this kind of content, maybe you'll consider subscribing before you leave. We're getting closer to 1,000 subscribers, but let's get into today's video and talk about my October wrap up and what I have read. Now this month, like I said, I'll be talking I think about 5 books, but they were pretty hefty books, some of them, and so I just wanted to let you know, like, it might be like, oh, 5 books, but granted I also have 3 children, so I feel like I'm pretty busy, but like I said, a lot of them are pretty big books. And the first one I want to talk about was the 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and I'll put them up on the screen because majority of these I read on Kindle or from my library, so I don't have them in print in front of me, but I'll put it up on the screen. So the 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, I know I kept seeing a lot about this book. It's been out for a little bit now, but I hadn't read it yet. I finally got it from my Kindle, and I believe I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I think that the book, it really did keep me engaged. I was intrigued by the concept, and if you don't know what it is about, there's this woman, it's a story of this woman, Evelyn Hugo, which there's more about her name as well in the story. But basically it starts off that there's a history of Evelyn is basically this famous starlet in Hollywood, and she's now, I believe, like in her 80s at the beginning of the story, and she wants to tell her life story, basically kind of like a tell-all memoir sort of thing, and so she wants to tell it to this journalist, and that's kind of the story. And it looks at her life and basically how she became who she is, and the reason it's called the 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo is because she, as like the famous starlet, she was married 7 times. Like, she's kind of known for that. That's one of the big things about her that's talked about in Hollywood and in the acting world and things. And so there's always that intrigue of like what exactly happened, in these marriages, and that's a part of what the book is, but there's more to it, and I don't want to give it away. I do think I felt like I was really into the story. The chapters I feel like were shorter, so it was pretty easy to keep up. Not all were super short, but it was kind of easy to keep going. I thought the pace was pretty good, but I felt like for me, I kind of predicted parts of the ending, which you guys know I don't like when I'm able to kind of guess what's going to happen. Not all of it, but about like 80% I pretty much predicted, which is kind of like eh. But I also felt like the way, I don't know, it's kind of like I felt like it was almost rushed at the end, because the book is pretty long, but I felt like it was really kind of building up and taking its time, and we start off from when she's younger and kind of go through her life and through these different marriages and these different stories, and it spans decades, and I love those kind of books when it spans decades. I find that very interesting, and there's just all these different situations and these different love stories, and I felt like I was really getting into it, and I felt like it was kind of rushed at the end for me personally. That was kind of like, it just kind of like ended, and parts of it were predictable, so that was kind of like, I didn't really like that about the ending. It wasn't a horrible ending. I think the author does really great writing. This is my first book by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I know that she's a pretty popular author, but it's my first one by her. She is a very wonderful author. I think she has a really, just like how she writes, it just really makes you think, and I really like it. So, but I did give the book a 4 out of 5. I thought it was pretty good. I'm glad I read it. I don't know if I will read it again. I know some people just like loved it so much. And again, I think that's kind of the risk with overhyped books. It's like, I don't know, I wasn't like so obsessed with it. I thought it was good, but I don't think I'll read it again personally, but I would recommend for others to try it out and see how you feel about it. Okay, the next book that I read, and I actually marked it as DNF. I did not finish it. I tried. It is Circe by Madeline Miller. Again, I heard about this author. I think I tried to read The Song of Achilles. I couldn't get into it either. So I thought maybe I'll try Circe because I've seen people talking about it. Kind of was an interesting concept, and I got it as an audiobook, and I think the narrator did a wonderful job with like the narration and the voice of how she was doing it. For me, I just think Madeline Miller is, her style of writing is not one that I really enjoy. Just personally speaking, I can tell like she has wonderful writing, but for me, sometimes I felt like, well, first I'll say kind of what Circe is about. So basically, Circe is about the story of Circe, if you know her in Greek mythology, but even if you don't, I think Madeline Miller does do a great job of explaining things to you that even if you have no idea who different, you know, Greek mythology characters are, you will still catch on in the story, so don't worry about that. And there were parts, like I think I made it to like 80%. Honestly, like I listened to the majority of it, but I wasn't like, oh my gosh, I want to hear what's next. Oh my gosh, I just was like, I felt like it was going and going. And especially after about like 45%, I just was like, ugh, like, I don't know, for me personally, I wanted to really like it. And there were parts that were interesting, but I just didn't really see where it was going, and I wasn't like in it. And basically it's the story of Circe, who is a goddess in Greek mythology, and just a different perspective of her, like her in the world and in the realm of gods. And it's interesting because seeing her perspective as a female, like a woman, just to see even the relation with like the other gods and how she's treated and why she becomes how she is, because she's kind of described as being a witch, and why she basically becomes who she is, because you kind of see the things that are done to her and how she's treated in her life experiences, and how she chooses, because there's a lot of times where she's kind of like neglected or just treated badly, and how she's, you know, like treated by her family, and how she internalizes and like what she does with it. And I did find the concept interesting again, so that's why I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. But again, I could not finish it. And let me know your thoughts down below, because especially if you finished it, did you know, how do you feel about it? Did you really like it? What are your opinions? But that was one I could not finish. The next 2 books that I read in October were parts of a series, and it's the Blood and Ash series. And this was my attempt to trying to do a trying fantasy again. If you know, a few months ago I tried reading a Sarah J. Maas book. It was the Crescent City, and that was my real first kind of jump into fantasy, and I didn't really like it. It wasn't horrible, but I was kind of like, meh. So I wasn't sure how I would feel about another adult fantasy book, but I thought I would give it a try, because again, sometimes I see it on YouTube where people talk about it, so I was like, I'll give it, you know, a try. And I had requested it on Libby, and it finally came, and I was like, we're going for it. So the first book is called From Blood and Ash. So basically what it is it is a story of Penelope, and she is a maiden in this society. And basically as a maiden, people can't talk to her, people can't see her, like she wears a veil, and she's basically being saved until there is this ascension process, or ascension that's going to happen, is being talked about. That's basically, she's seen as being chosen by the gods to be in this ascension, and so she's protected at all times. Again, she has all these limitations, like she can't marry, she can't talk to people, she can't just like live a normal life like everyone else. She's, you know, protected by everyone, saved kind of in part of the kingdom by the queen and everyone, that's just like her purpose is for ascension that's going to happen soon. And that's her job basically, and her goal in life. But she is obviously struggling, like in the story she's struggling with it, because that's the only life she's ever pretty much known. That there are these, and I'm sorry, I can never remember the names of, like, so basically that there are these, the people are trying to stay safe from these kind of like, oh my gosh, I can't even think of the words. But basically these like creature people things that attack them. They're kind of like soulless dead things, and they come and they kill you, and, you know, basically like devour you, whatever, gross things. But basically they kill you, and so then, and if you're bitten by them, you kind of become what those things are. And so there's this premise of this, you know, these people are trying to stay safe away from this, and the ascension is part of helping with that. And so again, why she is so important, and you know, her and the people in the town are taught these things, that, you know, they're being kept, you know, safe from these things, that we're doing all this to stay safe. But then part of the process that she has guards and people that keep her safe, and so she has a personal guard named Hawk, and he, of course we can see where this is going, right? Like dark, mysterious, handsome man. And so he is her personal guard, and of course there's kind of like the blurring of the lines because there seems to be an attraction there, but again, she's not allowed to be able to have relationships, to be married, like not any physical touch, none of those things are allowed for her as a maiden. So obviously there's like that like forbidden romance kind of thing, or you know, that desire there. So I thought it was an interesting read. So this book, I mean, these books are hefty. It's like over 600 pages. I flew through the first one in 2 days. I thought this was like a redeeming book. I felt like I was like, this was my first really like good experience with fantasy, like an adult fantasy book, and I really liked it. I gave this first one actually 4 out of 5 stars. It was a little bit predictable for me. I could kind of see where things were gonna go, but not all the way. And even when it was like somewhat like I knew was happening, there were plot twists, and I was like, wait, like this isn't totally, like it was pretty good. And again, like it does have some spice in it. So if you're someone who doesn't want to read any, don't read this book. But I think it wasn't like so obnoxiously overdone like maybe in some books. So I really liked the story. I just like the characters. And I also, sorry you guys, I wrote some notes. Also, it's like a little plug if you were interested. So I found this little journal on Amazon. It's called the Book Lover's Journal. And I wanted to maybe talk about this in another video if you're interested. But what I really liked about it is that it's very, so at the library where I work, we do reader's advisory, which is like telling patrons or being able to talk about books that we've read. And so this is really good because it really, if I'll try to show you guys up close if I can, you can see your 2 titles, but there's so much information for each book. And so like here I kept some notes, but then here you can see there's also like, there's so many things that they target, like talk about quality of writing, the pace, so you have a lot to really break down about a book, and I really enjoy that. So I would really recommend this, especially if you talk about books. But if you're like me and you read it and you know how you feel about a book but you forget the details, it's good to write it down. And so what I really like about this book is, even though it's fantasy, right, and there has some of these like maybe creatures or things, what I really liked is also kind of the background of the book. And I really like kind of how it challenges like social norms and different things, and how there's that divide between the monarchy and the, you know, the kingdom and the people, and just the social norms. I always find that interesting when it's talked about in books. But it does end in kind of a cliffhanger, which really left me excited to read the second book. It's Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, and that's the second one. This book, I think this is the first time that I actually have given a second book a better rating than the first one. I gave this one a 5 out of 5 for me personally. I loved it because I felt like I did not predict any of it. Like everything was new to me, everything was exciting. I felt like there's definitely more like fantasy in the second one. At this point, there's more like, there's like woven creatures involved, and like vampires and different kinds of things. But I know it sounds crazy, but they go well with the story. And I really also like the second one because in this story continues, I don't want to give anything away, but it continues more of the relationship between Hawk and Poppy, and like what's going on with her as the maiden. Anyway, what I really also love about this book is that the side characters are really well developed. I felt like you really connected to them. You really learned about them more. They're not just like there as like a helper, prop, or whatever to the main character like they often are in books. I felt like you really did, like, you get kind of attached to the side characters and you really learn more about them, and even like their family, their history. And I really like that. I felt like it was developed more in the second book than it was in the first one. And like I said, the second book was less predictable, which I really liked. So what I really enjoyed about this second book is that I think the way that Poppy's portrayed as being like strong and tough is done well. And I remember talking to my husband about this. I think I saw somewhere it was like sometimes writers or people confuse like a strong independent woman as like automatically meaning, oh, like she just has to be crazy and loud and like fighter and all this and blah blah, like all in your face, and like I'm a badass, like, you know, it's like, you know, probably if you've read books, you're like, this is so over the top. Like, badass woman does not always need to announce that she's a badass woman, like, you know. So I really thought that she was like, her character was done really well because she is strong and she does have like fighting skills or different things, but she's also like strong in different ways, like real women are. And I just think it was done well, and it wasn't like in your face, obnoxious, over the top, like, look at me, I'm a strong character, I'm a strong character, look at me, like, look at, you know what I mean, if you've read books like that. So I think it's just, she's portrayed really well in a believable way that's also relatable, again, especially to like other women. You're like, yeah, like there's different strengths to us all, right? And I found that very relatable with how how the author portrayed the character. So I really enjoyed that. The second book, it does include some spice again. So again, if you don't like any books of that, don't read it. It does also include like war and gore and like murder and fighting and things like that. So if you don't like books with that, don't, just be aware that it's there. But I also just really love the relationship between her and Hawk, and just even more in the second book. I just think it's so cool, and I really liked this book. I'm in the process of reading the third one, but I will update you. Let's just say it's not going as well, unfortunately. I don't know, maybe this will change, but I'll update you in November's wrap up and see how it goes. But 1 and 2, I really enjoyed. Definitely recommend. Let me know your thoughts down below if you've read the series. And also, if you have any recommendations for fantasy series, I'd like to try another one. So let me know if there's one that you're like, you know, totally love and you would recommend for me. The next book that I listened to on audio and I finished is the Book of Speculation. And I don't know, I just like I found it in my library and I was like, I'll try it, seems different, and it had a book in it on the cover, so I was intrigued. I gave this book 3 out of 5 stars, and the premise of the book is that there's this librarian, Simon Watson, and he receives this old book from a book collector, and basically finds out in the book that his family has a long history of women, women in his family committing suicide on July 24th and when they are young. And so like in the book you find out, and this is, I'm not giving it away, this is like in the book on the back. So basically you know right away that his mom killed herself, she drowned. So when she was on July 24th, when she was younger, and he didn't know, but when he gets this old book, he starts to build a history and realize that they're his like grandmother, all these other women on his side, the same like curse or thing happens, and he has a younger sister, and it's getting closer to July 24th. So he is obviously having this fear that like, is this going to happen to her? But it kind of takes you through the history of him and the time now, like between him and his sister and things that are going on, and how it's connected to the story that you're learning about in the past, which is kind of set in like kind of like a carnival traveling circus situation show. And there's like fortune tellers, you know, mermaids and stuff, and like different acts. And you're learning about the people in the show, and then obviously how it connects to his family now, and then the outcome of like what's going to happen. So I gave this book 3 out of 5 because I did want to keep listening to it. I wanted to keep reading it, and I did finish it. But I also wasn't like, oh my gosh, like, so I don't know how it felt. I almost felt like I didn't really hate it and I didn't really love it. I was just kind of in the middle. If you've read it, let me know your thoughts if you're kind of similar. But I just felt like, I don't know. That's pretty much my thoughts on it. I just don't know if I don't know if that tells you anything, but I mean, I would tell people to try it out. It's not like I'm saying like, oh my gosh, it's a game changer, at least for me personally. Again, 3 out of 5 stars is not bad. And I did want to keep reading and listening to it, but I also felt like, I don't know, I felt like it wasn't really what I expected, but yet it was at the same time, and I don't know, I felt like something was missing from it for me. And so therefore I just gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Okay, and the last book that I read is actually a children's book. I like to try to read at least a couple of children's books, although I do read a lot with my kids, but I don't count those, but just like children's books on my own or while I'm at work. So this book is one that I create the displays at my library, and this is one that I added to my display for Native American Heritage Month, which is in November. But I read this book, and it is called When I Was 8. And it is a picture book, so again, it's not very long at all, but it, like as you guys know, picture books can be very meaningful even in just a few pages. And so it tells a story about this girl, Olimon, Mount, if I'm correct remembering her name, and she is native, Alaskan Native, I believe, and so it tells it's based on a true story, and she is a native from a Native family, and she can do so many things, right, that her father has taught her, but she cannot read, and the only way to learn how to read is to go to like the white or outsider schools that, you know, they will teach her how to read. And she keeps pushing and pushing. Her dad doesn't want to send her because he knows more of the world and he knows what really lies there, but she is determined she wants to read. And so she eventually convinces her dad, and so he takes her to one of these outsider schools and leaves her there because they were boarding schools. And if you may know where this is going, if you know history, so basically when she goes to this school, it's run by nuns, and these nuns, basically they cut off her hair, they give her like an American name, an English name, and she can't speak in her language anymore. She, you know, just like she's basically mistreated, and it's some parts of it is hard to read, but I think it's important to learn the history of things that happened to people. And so it just kind of talks about how these difficult things happen and how some of the nuns mistreat her and just people or other people at the school, the other girls, and but also that her will to persevere and her desire is still there to want to read. And so just seeing how she goes through that, and it is actually the true story of the author, is from her experience of having been in one of these boarding schools and just like what happened to her. And so it's really, I think it is maybe sometimes difficult to read, so, you know, depending if you're going to read it with children or like knowing your audience, but I think it is something that even as an adult it's meaningful to read and to talk about. And so I would just consider you know, consider checking out this book. But I did enjoy it. I think it is an important read, and again, as a picture book, I also really loved the illustrations. I think they were done really well and the story was engaging. I believe I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. But yeah, I would recommend it. So there you have it, you guys. Wrap up for October. Hopefully not too crazy long. Hope you guys enjoyed it. As always, put down below book recommendations for me, because I love, you know, if people are able to share them with me. I would love to add to my ever-growing TBR list. Thank you all so much. And if you haven't yet checked out my latest video about 12 things you find at your library that are not just books, if you haven't yet, and I will see you in the next video. Bye, everyone.